Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am here with my fortuitous assistant, Greg Kenny, as we discover another aircraft. Greg, we have discovered another bit of an aircraft, I should say. Now, I don't know where this pipe has been. I just put it in my mouth, Greg. I hope it was sanitized before I did that. But I have now played the part which Mr. Kenny had asked me to do. So without further, I have again helped my fortuitous assistant, Greg Kenny. Now we're gonna do a 1-for-1 there. There's the hat, and let's see, there goes the pipe. Oh, good catch. All right, well, as I said, my name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. Now, today is a little bit different, and then we are doing, as you can see, a bit of an airplane. This is a Fairchild C-119. This is a flying boxcar. Now, you're saying, well, Fred, where's the rest of the airplane? I am going to tell you that. And also, a little bit of an inside secret. We have about 10 acres here, and we have, as I said, many airplanes, about 70 airframes. And one of the things that we do is we don't always have a complete aircraft. In this case, they just chew up so much darn space. And if you've ever been to museums where they have some of these really large airplanes, up to B-52s, B-29s, it's a real challenge to house those. And so in this case, this particular airplane, I'm going to tell you how it came to be behind me, but we have the forward section of that C-119. So let's get into it, shall we? The aircraft was originally developed by Fairchild in 1947, had its first flight in 1949, top speed of around 200, well, a cruising speed of around 200 miles an hour. It was a little bit faster. It also was built by two different companies, Greg. Did you know that? It was built by Fairchild. It was also built by Kaiser. Now, the interesting thing about that was Fairchild was never really happy about the fact that Kaiser built some of the airplanes. That caused also two different types of engine variants in the plane. But and some would argue that Fairchild eventually killed the development or the production of them at Kaiser. There we go. There goes another fun airplane. I don't know whether that's showing up in my audio, but Fairchild actually killed the development of, or the construction of that airplane at Kaiser, or so the legend goes. So there were a few of them built at Kaiser, but the majority of them were built by Fairchild. Now, the airplane had a development path that's kind of interesting. It came out of the C-82, the Packet. Now, the Packet was a late World War II twin-engine airplane, similar in the appearance of this airplane with the boom. It was incredibly underpowered. There weren't very many of them built, and the aircraft went into history, as they say, Greg. There weren't a lot of them built, and they went away. As we've talked about before, technology is changing at that time, and we are burning through airplanes. We are burning through aluminum as we are building different types of airplanes. The technology is updating. Things were changing really fast. So this particular aircraft, I'm going to grab it here. If I can get it off the stand. Good job. I didn't break it. There's the plan view of the airplane, the C-119. Of course, cargo in the back. Had a pretty good sized flight deck and a pretty good cargo area. It had these twin engines. As I said, there were two different types of engines. It depended on the manufacturer. Now, the other thing that you will see with this particular aircraft is something that's interesting, and that is that this plane also was one of the few that had a jet assist, either a jet pod that was in the center or on the gunship. The aircraft had two, one on either wing. And of course, we'll talk about that stinger in the tail. It became a gunship. It became a offensive platform. Not offensive like my British accent just was, Kenny, but became an offensive weapon. As I said, it was notoriously underpowered, which was why it got that jet assist. This is another one of those kind of interesting kind of stopgap airplanes. It played a relatively minor role in cargo as we went up to all the way up to C-130 and the C-17 and so on and so forth. But it nonetheless was a stepping stone on technology to get to the next level as far as cargo. The crews will tell you, and I've talked to crews that have flew these, everybody felt it was underpowered. Anybody who flew it felt it was underpowered. Now, it continued on out to the Navy until about 1974, and it did various things, dropping cargo and troops, and it could drop paratroopers. It also was in the firebomber role. Now, Greg, there's a problem with the firebombers. What was the problem with the firebombers? We've talked about it before. Wings fell off. So about 1987, most of these were grounded. Or, I wouldn't say most, all of them were grounded because they had a lot of structural failures with the airplanes. You can see there's over at Pima Air Museum, which is a fantastic museum. There is one of these over there with the centerline jet pod that was used for firefighting. It's still in its firefighting livery. Now, I've been told that in Korea, these would go out on night missions, and I've talked to crew guys. There were apparently these metal tie-downs that as they went over where they knew there were suspected North Korean positions, they would kick the metal out the back of the airplane. Can you imagine you're out there eating your dinner or whatever, and you get hit in the head with one of those things as this thing goes over? But it was in the cargo capacity, it was relatively unremarkable. Now, it had a gunship version that we're going to talk about. It also, Greg, had something else that was really cool, and that was it had JATO, jet-assisted takeoff or rocket-assisted takeoff. Now, a Fred fun fact, Greg. Fred fun fact. That actually, that JATO stuff, we keep going back to the Germans, but the Germans were, man, they did all kinds of interesting stuff. And there were rocket experiments done with gliders to give additional oomph, takeoff weight. That's, by the way, Greg, that's a technical term. Oomph. But they would use rockets and gliders. But the thing that was interesting was the German, and I'm going to screw this name up, but we're going to take a shot at it, the Gigant, which is the German heavy lift aircraft of the time. And that actually had JATO-assisted takeoff, which is probably, aircraft actually was operated in service, much to the detriment of the crews. It was essentially a flying bullseye. If you had any kind of air cover, you were in real trouble in that airplane. A bunch of them got shot down as they were trying to resupply North Africa. But that's where JATO, the Germans experimented with it in some of their late war bombers and some HE-111s, some Henkels, but that's where it started. This airplane also, to deal with the weight and being underpowered, JATO was extremely important, especially on, it was primarily used for short field takeoffs, but if you went real heavy with this airplane, you'd use it no matter what runway you had because it was the only way to get it in the air. Now, it also spawned an interesting, and I always say I use that word a lot. I've got to come up, Greg, I've got to train myself to come up. It came up with an intriguing variant, and that was the XC120.
There's always something new in aviation. Now it's the Fairchild XC120 pack plane, the first trailer truck of the skies. The pack plane looks like an overstuffed regular transport, as it's demonstrated in Hagerstown, Maryland. But this Air Force giant embodies an entirely new concept of air transportation. Its roomy fuselage can hold troops or even a complete hospital or machine shop. After the plane is landed, the entire fuselage or pod, like the trailer of a truck, can be detached in a few minutes. The giant pod is pulled away on its own wheels to be unloaded at leisure. The pack plane can take on a new fuselage, or it can fly away without any fuselage at all, a big time saver for both military and commercial aviation.
There was one of them built and operationally tested, but we were moving on to 4-engine transports and bigger transports, so the concept was abandoned in the mid to late 50s. So that was pretty much, from a development standpoint, the end of the genesis of this airplane. Now, I am going to gingerly put this down so I don't break it, and I'm going to work into my salute for the day, because if you flew that airplane, you might need a doctor. Oh man, there's no way we could do a rim shot here. You can add that in post, right? I set that one up. And Greg, this is fun because we're going to talk about my gratuitous product placement and my drink at the same time. So Dr. Brown's, now Greg, that, whatever you gave me last week, it took me days to recover. Rinsing my mouth out, that stuff was nasty. This is Dr. Brown's since 1869. Dr. Brown's is not a sponsor of the program. We're in Black Cherry Land, which that could be promising. It's made with all natural flavors, 180 calories, total carbohydrates 15%. So we're in pretty good shape. Now, the one thing I don't see with this, which is always a dead giveaway that there may be a potential poisoning here, is I don't see a sell-by date on this one. So we're gonna take a shot at this one, Greg. This is kind of scary. Now, before we do that, I want to also, and Greg can throw this up, but this is our gratuitous product placement. This is a magnetic, and Greg we'll see if this sticks, Greg. We can give it a, guess what, Greg? It doesn't stick. Well, it will stick to something. This is one of those things, like I feel like I'm on Johnny Carson. I'll date myself and the animal runs off the stage and I'm left here by myself. But it doesn't stick. It's supposed to be magnetic. It has a really cool picture of our airplane, although that's aluminum. But you'd think there's some metal in there or something it would stick to, but probably not. People are saying, it's aluminum, Fred. It's not going to stick. But it's got our beautiful P-51 bunny on it. It's beautiful. It's heavy enough so that if you're in the wild and you're being attacked by someone, you could throw this at them and possibly injure someone. We will see if it works as a bottle opener, one of its two functions. And of course, not only does that happen, yeah, Greg is raising his hands, but we have a little bit of an overflow on that. So the carbonation is there with Dr. Brown's cherry soda. So we'll get into this. Slightly overcarbonated. You know what? Greg, you have redeemed yourself. This Dr. Brown's is actually pretty good. Now the salute is going today is going to be if you were a C-119 pilot or you were a crew member, especially in the early 50s when this airplane was coming in, you were a pretty tough hombre. This was a scary airplane to fly when it was fully loaded. So I salute you and all those. Really, the material command, the MAC groups that were flying all of that cargo, especially back then when we were in serious trouble in Korea and moving stuff around. And I really salute you guys. You had a very, very tough job. And this this was an interim airplane, and to be able to fly in it, you had to have a lot of nerve. So I'll give you another excuse for me to. Well, we're gonna hold on to that. Now, remember, from a gratuitous product placement, we will sell you this, and it will stick to something. Greg says it will stick to something. If not, as I said, it makes a tremendous throwing tool. And after you knock someone over, you can open your beers. They're knocked out. But this aircraft also has a couple of other. One real step that I think is very interesting, and that is this became the C-119, the G model, the AC-119 Shadow, or the gunship. And it had 20mm cannons, miniguns, and it was also called a Stinger, and it worked in Southeast Asia. It was a very potent weapon. It was built on the C-47s that had, or the concept of the C-47s that became spookies. They called them spookies. They were at night, and they were really deadly in the ground attack, the C-47s. Now, the aircraft, it worked in that role, not a lot, but it worked in that role, and but again, like everything else that it did, it was essentially kind of a step airplane. We talked about the Sabre last week, which is kind of the basis for all kinds of different things as far as air combat. I would say that this, when we talked about the technology tree, this is a stepping stone into some of those other airplanes. Now, that gunship version was, of course, stepped up into the next technology jump, which was the C-130, the Spectre gunship, which we all know and love, although the enemy doesn't love it. I shouldn't really say everyone loves it. If you're on the receiving end, Greg, you probably don't love it unless you're a glutton for punishment. Kind of like me trying to stick this magnet. We are going to talk about a product placement failure here today with trying to get that thing done. So it was an intermediate airplane. Now, this particular aircraft, you're going to say to me, Fred, how did you get the front end of that airplane? Well, this aircraft, in the short story, had a fire, and this portion of the boom was destroyed. It went to aircraft boneyard to be recycled, and they took the nose off of it. They took, Greg can get a shot, but they took the part of the cargo section off the airplane, and when they did that, it sat in the field. There was a crew member who had served, there we go with another one of those fine aviation products. There was a C-119 crew member that had lovingly served on the type, and he purchased this. It was put on a rail car where it went to southern Nevada, and Greg can throw up images, and maybe we'll do some videotape of inside. But he completely restored this airplane. And then one day he called us and he said, I want it to have a good home, and it ended up with us. It is one of our displays. It's a great thing because the flight deck is fully restored, and kids can get up in there and they just have a ball in these partial airplanes. So that is the backstory on this. It is incredibly well restored. He even got all the instruments and everything on the flight deck, so it is very, very cool. Now, are there other distinctions? There are, in that portions of this aircraft, it's sort of a movie star. It was used in the Flight of the Phoenix. So there's a portion of this airplane that was used in Flight of the Phoenix. And sadly, at Dien Bien Phu, which I hope I got that right, it was the first American casualties at Dien Bien Phu, where they were dropping cargo and they were killed in a C-119. So it has a couple of little interesting historical milestones around the airplane. But that, as we sum up, is the C-119, a very, very cool stepping stone aircraft into more sophisticated technology. And I want to thank you for joining us today. Now, I do want you to do something, as we have another jet going out. We'll let him get away. I do want to do something, and that is I want to encourage you to go out to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Smash that subscribe button. Like us on Facebook. Remember, we cannot restore these airplanes without your donations. We get those from time to time. And if you've either gone out to our webpage or sent us a donation, I say thank you very much, because this is a very tough time for museums right now, and we really appreciate your support. You are the wind beneath our wings, so we want to thank you. So again, my name is Fred Bell. Have a great day.